Hey, I want to welcome you to another Friday of Who's Your One. We're spending some time trying to really learn about what God is calling us to do in order to reach out to that person in our life, maybe somebody at work, maybe somebody in our family, but somebody that's hurting, that's broken, that really needs a connection with God. I'm excited that you're here to work through this with us. And today I wanted us to talk a little bit about our faith, and I want us to talk a little bit about our testimony. You see, we often talk about being a witness. You know, Christ has called us to be a witness. What does it mean to be a witness or to give a testimony? Well, to be a witness, to give a testimony, is to share what God has done in you. A lot of us might struggle in saying, well, you know, Pastor, I don't know all the things that you know about Scripture. I'm still working through my spiritual process. I'm still trying to learn what I can about God. I don't really know if I could tell people about the Bible or tell people about Jesus. And that's where I think we get mistaken sometimes, is that we believe that our command, our imperative is to try to break the Bible down for somebody, try to work through it and figure it out so that they'll logically understand it and that we know all the ins and outs of it. But the reality is, when we talk about giving a testimony, we talk about giving a witness to who you are, all that is you sharing with somebody what Christ means to you. And Christ means something different to each and every one of us. Not theologically, but I mean our experience. You know, if we came out of a broken family, if we came out of some sort of great dependence on something, if we came out of a positive place, if we were raised overseas, or if we were raised in the big town or in the country, you know, each and every one of us have a different story of how Christ connected to us. In fact, you read the Gospels and you see how Christ connected with so many people across so many different divides. I mean, from religious people, a guy like Nicodemus, that was somebody that was in the religious powerful group that was there, to a woman that they said was literally drug out in the act of committing adultery and thrown there in front of Jesus. He talked with tax collectors. He talked with prostitutes. He spent time with soldiers and people in the army. He spent time with people that most of the world would just simply call crazy, you know, people that were demon possessed and at the ragged edge. And Jesus dealt with each of these people in very unique and positive and life affirming ways, leaving them always with that commission to go and sin no more, to be the type of person that Christ knew that they could be. And each of those people were left with a witness, left with something that they could share with the people that were around them. I want to look at a verse for you real quick. So let's go to our verse page, and I want us to look up. There was a gentleman in Scriptures, the Gennesaret man, and we're going to see if I spelled it correctly, because I probably didn't. Gennesaret. We'll see if we did that right. All right, so nope, it's giving us Genesis. So we're going to come over here. This is my go-to in order to find out what we're doing. But we're talking about how people encounter Christ and what it means to be, to give a testimony, to share our faith with somebody. And so I wanted us to look just a little bit. All right, now we got to go in. All right, so I wanted us to look just a little bit about, how Jesus called us to share our testimony with people. So we're going to quick jump over to Matthew chapter 14 real quick. So Matthew chapter 14, and that's not the verse that I wanted. All right, I got to go back to it. All right. And so I want us to look at a verse about somebody that maybe if you're saying, hey, I can't share my faith, because look where I've come from. Look where I've been. Look at the things that I've experienced in my life. How could I possibly be sharing my testimony with somebody? How could I be a witness to somebody when I'm really still new and struggling in my faith? And to be able to do that is a part of our call. Christ is going to give us the power to be able to handle that. And so I want us to look at a passage. It's in Luke chapter 8. It's a passage in Luke chapter 8. I'm going to pull it up now. In Luke chapter 8, this is about Jesus. He's in that he's in that Sea of Galilee area, so he's sailing around. He is meeting with people. If you look in the passages just before, we see about Jesus commanding the winds and the waves to stop. And so we see some really powerful things that Jesus is doing, and then they land. It says, then they set sail, then they sailed to the region of the Gerasenes, which is opposite Galilee. And when he got out on the land, a demon-possessed man from the town met him. For a long time he had worn no clothes and did not stay in a house, but in tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell down before him and said in a loud voice, "What do you have to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torment me." And so this is what we know about this guy. He's this demon-possessed guy. He is in an awful situation. Jesus looks at him. He says, "What is your name?" "What's your name?" Jesus asks him. "Legion," he said, because many demons had entered him, and they begged him not to banish him into the abyss. And so Jesus had this ability to banish them, and they're like, don't do that. There were a large herd of pigs that were there feeding on the hillside, and they said, "Let us go into the pigs." And so Jesus granted that request, and some people had seen what was happening, and said, meanwhile, the eyewitnesses reported to them how the demon-possessed man was delivered. Then all the people of the Gerasene region asked him to leave them because they were gripped by fear. So getting into the boat, he returned, and the man from whom the demons had been departed begged him earnestly to be with him. But he sent him away and said, "Go back to your home and tell all that God has done for you." And off he went, proclaiming throughout the town how much Jesus had done for him. So, this is kind of my thought when I'm looking at that passage. This man, demon possessed, it said for years, was so wild. They would throw him out in the tombs. They would chain him up, but the demons gave him the strength at times to break the chains and to maraud the neighborhoods. And I'm sure the kids told tales about him and all these awful things. Then Jesus shows up. Jesus casts the demons out of him. And the man says, "Jesus, I want to go with you and follow you. I want to be where you are." And Jesus says, "No. I want you to stay here and go back to your home, go back to your town, and tell all that God has done for you. Bear witness. Tell people what I did for you." That's what giving a witness is all about. That's what telling your testimony is all about. What has Jesus done for you? What were you like before you met Jesus, and what are you like now on the other side, now that you know Jesus, now that you have a personal relationship with Jesus? How has that relationship changed, that dynamic changed in your life? And tell about it. This guy didn't have any training. This guy didn't get to spend years and years with Jesus learning. This guy wasn't around the disciples who were like, "Okay, we're going to say this, but don't say that. And here's our strategies." Didn't get strategies, didn't get, a PowerPoint presentation. He was just told, "Go tell people how much God has done for you." And then it said the guy went off and he started proclaiming throughout the town how much Jesus had done for him. I mean, what a great testimony. What a great story that this guy had, that he had so little. He was demon possessed. He was feared by everyone, and Jesus healed him and said, "Now all you need to do is go bear witness of what I've done. Go tell people about who I am." And that's the crux of our commission from God, is that call to go and tell people about who Christ is, about what he has done for us, for me. I mean, for me, I know that he's given me confidence. I know that he has forgiven me of my sins. I know that he has taken things about me that are awkward and wrong, and he's made them all right. And I can share that testimony. I can tell people about what he's done for me. I can talk about the specific things, the times that I didn't think we'd have enough money to make it to the end of the month, but he delivered and he provided. The times that I was down and out, and he sent a friend. The times that I would beg to him, God, if you would just hear this prayer, and he heard the prayer and he answered and he delivered time and time again. And I'm so grateful that God has done those sort of things in my life, and I ought to be able to share and tell about it, about the great things that God has done. And so what I wanted us to do today is I wanted us to spend some time in the book of Hebrew, because in the book of Hebrew there's this section about kind of what we call the roll call of faith, and I wanted it to be an encouragement to you to know that you are a part of this story. And so if you have your Bibles or you want to follow along with us on the screen, we're going to be in Hebrews starting in chapter 10. We're going to read just kind of the end, verse 32 and to the end of chapter 10, but then really spend most of our time in chapter 11 and a little bit of time in chapter 12. And so in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 32, it says, "Remember the earlier days when you had been enlightened. You endured a hard struggle with sufferings, and sometimes you were publicly exposed to taunts and afflictions, and at other times you were companions of those who were treated that way. For you sympathized with the prisoners and accepted with joy the confiscations of your possessions, because you know that you yourselves have a better and enduring possession. So don't throw away your confidence, which has a great reward. For you need endurance, so that after you have done God's will, you may receive what was promised. For yet in a very little while the coming one will come and not delay. But my righteous one will live by faith, and if he draws back, I have no pleasure in him. But we are not those who draw back and are destroyed, but those who have faith and are saved." I mean, what a great, encouraging set of verses that is to start with. It's talking about, remember the earlier days. There's going to be a time in all of our faiths when we are going to struggle. And the writer of Hebrews is saying, remember those early days, those days of struggling, the days that you were taunted for your beliefs, those days people contrasted who you were before your salvation with who you are now, and maybe called you a hypocrite and said, how can you believe this Jesus? Look at the parting you did. Look at the things that you did beforehand. And all you can say is, I'm redeemed now. I'm changed. Let me tell you my story. And it talked about how we live in this world day after day by faith. Just trusting that God is who he says he is, and that God is going to deliver us regardless of the circumstances around us. And that becomes the thrust of Hebrews chapter 11. The thrust of Hebrews chapter 11 is, let's see how people have lived by faith. And consequently, by living by faith, it means we're people that are living with a testimony that we have to share to the lost and the people that are around us. And so in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1, it says, "Now faith is the reality of what is hoped for, the proof of what is not seen." This is a phrase that comes up all the time with faith. Faith is that reality of what we're hoped for. Faith is what we're hoping in God. And we're not talking about a blind hope, but a hope that God will always accomplish what he says he's going to accomplish, the proof of what is not seen. For by this our ancestors were approved. And let's look at faith, what it has done for people. It says, by faith we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen was made from things that are not visible. By faith, Abel offered to God a better sacrifice than Cain did. By faith he was approved as a righteous man, because God approved his gifts, and even though he is dead, he still speaks through his faith. By faith, Enoch was taken away, and so he did not experience death. He was not to be found because God took him away. For before he was taken away, he was approved as one who pleased God. Now without faith it is impossible to please God, since the one who draws near to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. By faith, Noah, After he was warned about what was not yet seen and motivated by godly fear, built an ark to deliver his family. By faith, he condemned the world and became an heir of righteousness that comes by faith. By faith, Abraham, when he was called, obeyed and set out for a place that he was going to receive as an inheritance. He went out even though he did not know where he was going. And by faith, he stayed as a foreigner in a land of promise, living in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, co-heirs of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose architect and builder is God. By faith, even Sarah herself, when she was unable to have children, received power to conceive offspring, even though she was past the age. And since she considered that one who had promised was faithful, therefore from one man, in fact, from one as good as dead, came offspring as numerous as the stars of the sky and as innumerable as the grains of the sands along the seashore. All these died in their faith, although they had not received the things that they were promised. But they saw them from a distance, greeted them, and confessed that they were foreigners and temporary residents on the earth. Now those who say such things make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. And if they were thinking about where they came from, they would have had the opportunity to return. But now they desire a better place, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. So that was a lot of things that were going on all at one time. But we see how these ancient people in scriptures have proven by faith, not by anything else, not by accomplishing a set of tasks that God has out for them, but just by trusting and believing in God, not having the end lined out for them, but just believing that God was God. By having faith in him, God delivered them. God provided for them. And it said even at their death, that ultimate faith, which is when God has promised that he was going to restore all things, that's Jesus Christ. When he comes, he lives, he dies, he rises again, and then he offers salvation for us. They never got to see that fulfillment of it, but they got to see darkly down the corridors of history that God was preparing and planning for this great way. And so they had faith in God, that God was going to take care of things. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he received the promises, and yet he was offering his one and only son, the one whom it had been said, your offspring will be traced through Isaac. And he considered God to be able even to raise someone from the dead. Therefore, he received him back, figuratively speaking. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come. And by faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph, and he worshipped leaning on the top of his staff. And by faith, Joseph, as he was nearing the end of his life, mentioned the Exodus to the Israelites and gave instructions concerning his bone. He believed that God was going to return them to the promised land. And so he said, when I die here, dig up my bones and bring them back to the promised land when you're done. By faith, Moses, after he was born, was hidden by his parents for 3 months because they saw that the child was beautiful and they didn't fear the king's edict. And by faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter and chose to suffer with the people of God rather than enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. For he considered reproach for the sake of Christ to be greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, since he was looking ahead to the reward. And by faith he left Egypt behind, not being afraid of the king's anger. For Moses preserved as one who sees him who is invisible. By faith he instituted the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn might not touch the Israelites. And by faith they crossed the Red Sea as though they were on dry land. When the Egyptians attempted to do this, they were all drowned. And so here we continue to see in this roll call of faith these people that are following God in faith. We continue to see God doing great things and delivering them. And by their faith in God, we have these testimonies of what they did, what they were able to accomplish by trusting in God. All right, we continue to go. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell down, being marched around by the Israelites 7 days. By faith, Rahab, the prostitute, welcomed the spies in peace and didn't perish with those who disobeyed. And what more can I say? Time is too short for me to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and the prophets, who by faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched the raging fires, escaped the edge of the sword, gained strength and weakness, became mighty in battle, and put foreign armies to flight. Women received their dead raised to life again. Other people were tortured, not accepting release so that they might gain a better resurrection. Others experienced mocking and scourging as well as bonds and imprisonment, and they were stoned and they were sawed in two and they died by the sword. And they wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, afflicted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in the desert and on mountains, hiding in caves and holes and in the ground. And all these were approved through their faith, but they did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better for us, so that they would not be made perfect without us. I mean, what a great testimony we hear about these people of faith. And that's what we mean when we say testimony. When we say testimony, we mean an opportunity for us to share about what God has done for us, an opportunity to share about how God has impacted our lives. And so so all these were approved through their faith, but they did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better for us, so that they would not be made perfect without us. And so God had a plan. God had a plan for perfection, but these people still by faith lived the life that God called them to live. And they shared that story. They told the story of how God delivered them. It's that living by faith. And it was that call to share how God had changed them and what God had done to them. And this was before Christ came and was able to actually change the very nature of their soul to be able to save them from the grave. This is before that, but because they had faith in God, God was faithful to them. And now we find where you and I stand among all those people. In Hebrews chapter 12, it says, "Therefore, since we also have such a large crowd of witnesses," people that have seen God and followed through in faith, that large crowd of witnesses from Abraham and Enoch to David and Daniel. Since we're surrounded by such a large crowd of witnesses, let us lay aside every hindrance and the sin that so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that lies before us. Let us get about doing the work of God. Let us live our faith out like these guys live their faith out, keeping our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy that lay before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. And here we see it. The Bible says, let us run now. It's our time to run. It's our time to live our faith, to share it with the people around us. And we don't do it alone, but we do it like in an arena, where we're running and we're surrounded by all those people of faith that have gone on before us. The person that maybe shared the gospel with you might be up there cheering you on, and the person that shared the gospel with him, Apostle Paul himself, is up there cheering you on. And you have all these people, these witnesses of what God has done throughout history, and they're now witnessing you as you run after Christ, as you run after God. And so I want to encourage you, as you're thinking about who's your one, I want you to know that there is a history, a long line, thousands of years of people that have been running after God. And because those people did it, you are able to stand before Christ, justified, washed clean by the blood of the Lamb. And all they're saying is follow our witness. Run the race as if to win the prize. Keep our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. And when we run after Jesus, we're going to see the results of our one and our next one and our next one, and people coming to know Jesus. I'm going to be praying for you, praying that you would live out the faith that God's put in you, unashamed, that you would be willing to boldly say, this is what I believe, and this is what I'm going to preach. This is what I'm going to teach. This is what I'm going to tell people. I have a testimony to share. I have seen it with my eyes because this is what God has done in me. Let me tell you my story. Sure, maybe we're going to be more like that demoniac that was in Gerasene. Maybe we're going to be like that person. I've known Jesus this long. He delivered me. And all he says is, all right, now go tell people. Go back to town and let them know. And so with the limited amount that we know, hey, I know that I was blind and now I see. That was the blind man's testimony. He had no other testimony. He's like, I believe him because I was blind, but now I see. What's your testimony? What's your witness? I want to encourage you this week to share it with your one. Let them know how excited you are that God has done great things in your life, because He has. He has taken you from dead to alive. And He wants to do that with your friends too. God bless you all. I look forward to seeing you guys next Sunday, and I look forward to hearing more stories about how God's working in your one. See you then. God bless.